Today on Mental Health News Radio, Kristin is joined by Helen Witty. Helen Witty is the national president for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Shattered by the sudden and violent loss of her daughter, Helen Marie, Helen found hope through MADD, which soon gave her a platform to help others who had suffered similar tragedies. Helen believes it's stories like hers and others that hold the power to create change. You won't want to miss this important and inspiring conversation. Thanks for tuning in.
I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried. Will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Helen, thank you so much for coming on Mental Health News Radio.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, this organization, MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, I have known about this, and I'm 50, and I have known about this since I was in high school. There was this huge push, when the organization was started, and this was part of my high school curriculum, and it was such a big deal. It made a huge impact on my life, thinking about drinking and driving. So talk to us about, you're joining the organization, your volunteer work, and how long this has been going on.
Wonderful. Kristin, thank you. And you are the perfect example of how MADD managed to change the culture. And it was a culture that needed changing. And this year is 40th anniversary. So it sounds like it had been around 10 years before you started, understanding what it was, which is, we're still working on that. In 1980 in California, a young daughter was walking along the side of the road when she was killed, knocked out of her tennis shoes by a repeat offender. And when that repeat offender experienced no consequences other than perhaps $100, that mother in California said, wait a minute. And what America started learning was that there were somewhere between 25,000 and 30,000 people dying every year because of drunk driving crashes. And that one voice, to me, it's very inspiring. One woman's voice in California connected with one woman's voice on the East Coast. And Cindy Lamb is her name. Her 9-month-old infant was rendered a quadriplegic. They started, and you might have seen some of that beginning, but what they did that was so powerful was they put a personal story on hers.
I think we had someone
Yeah.
come speak at our school, a volunteer. It just because I would have been 10 then when this organization started, and it came to me in seventh and eighth grade, so a couple of years later, and it's phenomenal. I mean, I was in Southern California, so that probably it started with that reach there where it started, but it came out so hard, so fast, so big that it had a huge impact on everyone at that age. So that would have been for me, the early 1980s.
Right. The genesis of it. And it was so needed. And you fast forward now 40 years and you understand we still have about 10,500, actually, I'll be exact, 10,511 people lost their lives in 2018 because of impaired driving crashes. And so that's still way too many. One is too many, but it's a whole lot better than somewhere between 25 and 30,000.
That is when a grassroots organization is just doing phenomenal work.
Yes. And it was the volunteers, and it happened that there became a MADD volunteer office across the nation in every state. And that raised the voice. And again, it's the personal stories that have the power that allowed MADD to change the legislation. MADD lobbied hard on underage drinking, because we know today's underage drinker is tomorrow's drunk driver. And we also now know that the science supports that protecting yourself and your brain when you're young.
Yeah.
Vital. So that, and then, if I may, if you'll allow me to keep talking.
Yes, please.
My personal story came 20 years into MADD's founding. So 1980 was MADD's founding. My daughter was rollerblading on a bike path on a sunny afternoon near our home when she was struck on the bike path by a teen who was impaired on alcohol and marijuana. My daughter's body went flying. The car crashed into a tree. I heard the sirens and can remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so glad she's not in a car.
I'm so sorry.
So it was, and then when she didn't come home, my husband jumped in his car to go find her, and he had to identify her at the scene. And nobody should have to do that.
No.
Nobody. And it shattered our family. So that's what brought me to MADD in the year 2000. My daughter was 16 years old. She was killed by a 17-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
That's what took my volunteer. Once, MADD was there for me. I landed in their laps, and there were strong men and women who had experienced loss and had survived the pain of grief and learned to live again. And MADD taught me that. And for years I volunteered, and then I came on staff to work in schools in my hometown. And I went and spoke to teenagers and said, this is what can happen. That 17-year-old, instead of going to college, went to prison. This is my daughter's life was ended. So there's no comparison.
Right.
The offender's life changed, and it was up to her whether or not it was ruined. But it's a very important, vital message to get to our young people and to get to everyone that alcohol and other drugs can impair the mind for driving. And so I always say it's so simple. If you drink, don't drive. Right. If you drive, don't drink. MADD is not against alcohol. We take no stand on the sale of alcohol, but we do take a stand on driving after drinking, simply because it kills people.
It's interesting how this, I just said, this has been something I've been aware of forever and so important to me. I went and volunteered in other directions. I volunteered for the Adam Walsh Foundation, and a lot of my volunteer work was with child sexual abuse. I went in that direction, but I always knew about MADD. And what made me go, I need to interview someone there was I had a new friendship with someone who's no longer a friend for good reasons, but I kept hearing things and witnessing behavior that just wasn't okay. And then saying it wasn't okay, someone got very defensive, but when you're in the mental health field, you're trying to understand, is this, a bipolar issue? Is this depression? What is this? Until they asked me and got upset with me because I said no. When they asked me, when they said, hey, about 4:00, I start drinking until I go to sleep. And sometimes I like to just drive around. It's fun. Will you come with me? That would be so much fun.
Oh,
and I said, no, that's illegal. It's so dangerous. Haven't you ever heard of MADD? And they just went ballistic. And that was the end of that friendship. But that was when I said, okay, I'm having them on my show. Because that's the only thing I can do is give voice to something and hope that it resonates with other listeners,
Right. And thank you. And here's the other thing, Kristin, that you didn't do. You didn't get in that car.
Oh, yeah. Or drive. I mean,
or drive. And that's the message. Get in the car.
Yeah. People don't think, it does, we've done a million shows with brilliant MDs and, PhDs and so on, talking about what it does to the brain. We've had Dr. Daniel Amen come on and talk about what alcohol does to the brain. All of those things, of course, are important. But I love that you guys kept this at, listen, we're not shaming anyone for drinking. We're just saying, don't get in a vehicle. And people don't realize this thing, if you really think about it, we forget about it. You go throughout your day, you get your car, it takes you to the store, it takes you where you want to go, but you forget about the fact that this is something that can kill.
Right. With no intention.
Right.
And that's to me, that's the truly terrifying thing, is that nobody ever intends to hurt anyone. And they end up making themselves a killer.
Right.
And, that's terrifying for everybody. It's mostly terrifying for the people who lose their lives or lose their ability to live through severe injury. These injuries that they could be a broken neck. It could be, a broken back. So this is just a crime that never has to happen.
Right. Exactly.
And that's the message. And that's our message also for young people is, protect yourself, protect your friends, understand what's at stake here. So many people don't understand also. Well, first of all, alcohol is the number one killer on our roads. And so many people, parents especially, may not think, it's just alcohol. Please, for every parent that's listening here, alcohol is the number one killer drug for our young people. And that is an important message for parents to understand. Protect your child, protect your young person. I think probably if you've had those scientists on, they're going to say the human brain isn't developed till mid-20s. Mid-20s. And we know that the earlier a person starts consuming alcohol or marijuana, which is legal in many places nowadays, that the more likely they are to become addicted and the more likely they are to become a drunk driver. So, and if you will allow me, the most dangerous combination is the alcohol and the marijuana. And
yes, talk about that.
Well, today, here's an alarming statistic. We know that 1 in 3, if you have a young person consuming alcohol, now this could be, MADD is going to be zero tolerance under the age of 21, period. I'm always going to say, make sure your child is safe, but make sure your child has the information of what alcohol does to the human brain and the human mind so that they're aware and can make that decision. But for a young person of any age, above and below 21, 1 in 3 of them who consume alcohol consume marijuana at the same time.
Mm.
1 in 3. And we know that combination is particularly dangerous. And adults could also be doing it. Somebody having a couple glasses of wine may consume some marijuana as well. And that is particularly dangerous for impairment. And here's the thing, Kristin, nobody ever thinks they're impaired.
Right.
Oh, fine. I'm fine. And that's the scary part. And so that's what we want people to understand. The combination of those two drugs is more impairing than just double.
Yes. And you're not saying don't do them, do whatever your life is about, but don't get behind the wheel of a vehicle or in a vehicle.
That's also, I worked with a young woman at MADD for many years who was drinking with her fiance. And she said, you shouldn't be driving home. And he said, oh, come on, don't you trust me? And she got in the car and he broke her neck.
Oh my gosh.
And she had to live the rest of her life in a wheelchair. And let me tell you, she spoke with students. She became a mental health counselor. And I worked with her at her middle school. It was very powerful to hear her speak. But my message to young people would be, somebody says, what's the matter? Don't you trust me? You say, no, I don't. And back away from the car. Because it was such a powerful story that she would talk to the students about.
Those are the things, it's the stories, because that's what
Right.
I remember so much about it, was making it personal. Here is a picture of my daughter, my friend, whoever it was, and bringing that in, that story piece. That is the piece that resonated with me and my friends sitting there in 8th grade,
Yes. And that is the power of MADD, is the power of personal stories. So it is, and it's a life-saving organization. If we can reach those young people and say, the decision is going to be yours. Your parents are not going to be around.
Right.
You're going to make a decision. And we have, positive young people that are working with MADD on Facebook, talking about it. And especially now, coping with what's going on in this pandemic. Maybe they're at home seeing horrible coping habits.
Well, yeah. I mean, alcohol purchases are up 70% since March.
Wow.
This year.
Wow.
And
Yes.
The number of eating disorders, substance abuse, and so on is up 300%.
Oh, that's so alarming. And I appreciate you getting the message out there that, drugs, alcohol, or any other drug is not a coping mechanism. It buries things and they'll come out bigger later. You're not going to solve any problem with drugs, alcohol, or any other drug. And that's so important, especially now, for people to understand. We want to focus on the positive. Take a walk, be around positive people.
Exactly.
Yes. And learn these coping skills for the rest of your life that don't include alcohol or other drugs. It would be in, art, music, friends, going out with friends and talking and surrounding yourself with positive people, because you know what? These are hard times.
Yes.
Hard times.
And if you do, I mean, listen, the refrigerator has become my friend again. So it's certainly triggered my own eating disorder that I've, been in recovery for since before 8th grade. But it's not that we're saying don't do these things. It's just don't operate something that can kill other people. I had someone that was driving around in a golf cart who was inebriated and had their children on the golf cart with them and drove into a lake at night, thought, oh, well, it's just a golf cart. I can get home safely. And, one of the children died. The other one has severe TBI. And, he was hit with all kinds of, legal things because he was operating a motorized. It's different than when it's a car. But even still, that anything that has the power to, to run somebody over, or that you need to make snap decisions, like don't pick up a chainsaw when you've been, it seems obvious, but then you get in a vehicle and you're like, okay, it's like, no, just walk home.
Right. Yes. And, to be responsible for the death of your child. Can you? Yeah. Can't imagine.
Or someone else's. Absolutely.
Yeah. But beyond that, Kristin, think about this. Think about the example you're giving. The example you're giving to your young people and your family, that it's okay to after drinking. Then they'll see their friends drinking. And we know young people metabolize alcohol and marijuana differently. And they think, oh, well, my parents do it. It must be okay.
Right.
And so that's a lesson that it's so important now, especially now when there's families are closer.
Right.
And those young people are watching and they're learning. They do what they see. And so it's something for people to understand. And alcohol can be enjoyed. Just don't enjoy it and drive any amount. Because what if you're taking a cold medication? Or what if you're taking another medication?
Right.
And combination of drugs is something that might impair you more.
Right, exactly.
It's
one of those things where it's not just about you. It's also about, the safety of others around you. It's putting yourself in the position of not just thinking about yourself.
Right.
I think I'm going to be fine. Well, good for you. However, is it okay for you to then also totally ignore the fact that you could harm someone else?
Right.
It isn't just about you when you're in those situations. I want to ask you this because MADD's been around for so long. How have you seen the atmosphere, the ability to listen change from our youth and also adults to the message over the years? Because I give you an example, mental health, and like when I was going and doing speeches about sexual abuse of children, nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about that in 1984, right? So I was the lone kid, talking about this. But I've seen obviously that change. Same thing with mental health. We can now talk about these things, and that's amazing. So I wonder with this, because it's been around so long, what have you seen in terms of the listening and the absorbing factor?
Well, that going back to 1980 California, people would say this is a socially acceptable homicide. This is a social, and that just blew my mind. They were still saying that 20 years later in some circles. So it's a whole different paradigm shift. It's not socially acceptable. And so I think that many of our young people are getting this information. They're listening. For example, many are using rideshare when their plans include alcohol. That would be a responsible parent thing to do. Oh, we're going out to dinner, children. We're going to have some wine. We'll use rideshare.
Yeah, Uber, whatever. Yeah, there's so many things available.
Whatever, a taxi, whatever, a designated driver. Mom's going to have a glass of wine. Dad's going to drive. That kind of thing. And I think young people are much more aware these days of what's going on around them. And the idea that all young people consume drugs is just wrong. And maybe that's what they're hearing from peers who are consuming drugs. But even, there is a large majority that is not. You'll say, 3 in 10. Well, that means the 7 are not consuming alcohol. It depends. And you know what? It gets harder and harder the older they get. 10th grade in school seems to be a game changer. And when they either are going, that's why parenting is so important early. No, you might think, oh, they don't know what's going on. They know what's going on.
Oh yeah, they know younger and younger what's going on.
Yes. And yes, that may be also the mental health. You touched on it a bit there. It used to be a stigma to speak of mental health.
Right.
Now we're being open about it and trying to understand it and trying to be supportive and compassionate without allowing someone to endanger others.
Right.
So that would be something that has changed.
Good. Now with COVID, because what was such a big impact on me, and I was in a lot of trauma in high school in 8th grade and so on. So I wasn't really at school much. And I still remember those talks that MADD would come out and give, for school assembly. So it's, and anyone that came out to school assembly, those were a big deal. Even if I was laughing during it, not really paying attention, I was paying attention because you know how kids are. So now with COVID, how have you had to change and morph how you do those kinds of talks and still get the message out where you couldn't go and be at a school?
Right. Well, our folks across the country, that's one of the most inspiring things to me, serving as national president, is the volunteers, the victims who share their stories, the staff who work so hard to reach people. And what we're doing is what we're doing right now. We're Zooming, and people Zoom now in court.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I just recently Zoomed with a family in Germany because their son was an exchange student and was killed by a drunk driver. So the Zooming has pros and cons. I want to say unequivocally, the most important is face-to-face.
Yeah.
But while we're being careful because of COVID-19, we're using Zoom. And some of our program specialists, which would be the person that's responsible for schools, can Zoom to classes.
Right.
Zoom to schools and still have a personal story. So that's helpful. I'm looking forward to the day when we can be in person again.
Right.
And be protected and figure out how that's going to look. But MADD's still out there working hard. And I have met so many. I mean, I met a family in New York whose son was killed on a Sunday morning as he hiked with his Boy Scout troop. And he was killed by a drunk driver leaving a golf course on a Sunday morning. And you talk about heartbreak. I mean, that's just one. And they're standing up and telling their story so that people will say, wait a minute, this isn't okay.
That's the piece. It helps parents remember to say something because you get so caught up in just getting through each day that you forget to have those important conversations. I mean, I know I did, and then you get whopped upside the head by hearing a MADD speaker come and you go, okay, I have to talk about this, but there's but also how important it is. I mean, it's the teenage brain. I mean, it's getting a message in is like, you have to keep poking at it, inserting wherever it can go because of the one time that they may be asked, oh, come on, let's just go to this party. I'm fine, and for them to remember because they heard it 12 times, 22 times, one time, whatever the key is for that kid to go, no.
Right. And that's exactly it. For the young people, sometimes the future is this weekend.
Exactly.
And that is important for them to understand. No, the future could be 5 years in advance, and you want to protect yourself and you want to protect your friends. And you are exactly right. These conversations that come from parents need to be ongoing and intentional. And, young people today many times they don't want to converse face to face. They want to text or Twitter or tweet, whatever it is. But so it's our responsibility as parents to make it at a point out at dinner or at home at dinner when you're face to face, to start the conversation. And then not just one time, it may not be a comfortable conversation, but come back to it because it could save their lives.
Right.
And that's what we want to do.
Well, let me ask you this as my last question. How can you explain how MADD helps? What victims, families that have been through this can do to get help through the organization? Where do they go? What do they do in order to find out what you have to offer?
Absolutely. It is all on MADD.org. We have our programs for parents. We have our programs for teens. We have statistics. We have personal stories. We have opportunities to volunteer. So everything is at MADD.org. And it is, it's a wonderful organization that saves lives. And that's what we want to do. It's that simple. So I am very appreciative of what you do. Thank you, Kristin, for the opportunity to make people aware and understand how important it is for young people, especially not to cope with alcohol or drugs. Here, I'll end with this. Clarity is an incredibly powerful thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And during a time when we are all just waiting to see what the heck is going to happen with our politics, with COVID, all of those things, it is even more, you need to be even on higher alert about things like this while there's so much, there are so many unknowns out there. So that was another reason I wanted to do this. Helen Witty, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have this love in my heart for MADD since it's such an impact on me as a young teen. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Well, Kristin, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
And listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember to go to www.madd.org. And thanks for listening to another episode of Mental Health News Radio. Hi, listeners. I'll make it quick. These are some really cool places that give discounts and other cool things for listeners of Mental Health News Radio Network. If you want to get amazing help with healing from narcissistic abuse, go to healfromanarcissist.com. If you want CBD products that are the best of the best, I use them myself, go to proze.com and use the code mentalhealth20, mentalhealth20. If you want to get daily perk ups that help retrain your brain to think more positively, go to perkupdaily.com. And also, just because this one's fun, snarkycandles.com. I guarantee you'll love them. Snarky with a Y, SNARKY, candles.com. And don't forget, if you want to hear all the shows on the network about first responders, you can go to firstrespondermentalhealthnetwork.com, and all of our shows that focus on narcissistic abuse, narcissisticabusehealingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
One thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristin Walker, and thank you for listening.
Me tonight, and I can ride the low, low, lows with me. I can ride the low, low, lows with me till my vision clears apart.
boy.